Hey everybody, hopefully you're going to get outside today and enjoy this weather. I hope to later on. I just want to give you a brief lesson today on the part of your new assignment that's due May 22nd, by the way. It was originally due May 20th. I don't think I actually included it on the paper. I had mentioned it in the videos, but May 22nd is a Friday, so you've got plenty of time to do it. I think it'll be interesting to you. I think if you put the time in, I think that you'll see that it's something that you can manage and answer effectively, and it may even be interesting to you in places, I hope. So what I want to emphasize for the last paper, remember that if you choose to revise them, I put on when I returned it to you in Google Classroom, you can there's a date on there that you can send it back to me by. Okay. So if you choose to do that, great. What I want to do is kind of look at this first part of your question, which discussed the role that nationalism played in the United States as we engaged in imperialism in Latin America and in Asia. Discuss the role that nationalism played as we got involved in wars with Spain. So last time we looked at the Boxer Rebellion and we talked about nationalism and kind of imperialism in Asia. One of the offshoots of that is the Philippines, because we're actually going to get involved there because of the Spanish-American War. The Philippines was a colony, okay, an area that was controlled by Spain for over a century. And it was because the Spanish had lost the war, and there was some upheaval not only in Cuba, as you're aware, which caused us to get involved, but also in the Philippines, which was their other major, holding in Asia. And one of the things that happens there is you have quite a bit of nationalism there too. The Filipinos begin to feel this sense of nationalism and actually have leaders who inspire this. And so what ends up happening is there's some promise and hope as we defeat the Spanish that the Filipinos would be acknowledged and recognized as an independent nation. So we had a couple of options there. We could either recognize them as independent, we could give them back to Spain, or we could establish some sort of control over them, annex them, and people were against that in this country. Many were for it, some were against. And so what ends up happening is the Filipinos are not granted their independence, and we maintain something like a protectorate over them. And this creates a lot of issues right away. So when the American troops kind of march into the Philippines, rather than be accompanied by the Aguinaldo and the Filipino forces that fought against the Spanish, they don't walk in with us. We don't let them do that. And so that's a message really to everybody that we were about, being the new next imperial power there. And this is where you start to see books have been written, and you can kind of analyze the situation and say, well, what was our real motive here in the Philippines? And we like to make things simple, and we like to say, this is why we were there. And we're typically cynical. We're pretty negative people, right? So we'll say, well, we were just trying to expand our empire, obviously. But when you look at the motives, I think you're going to see that there's layers and that there's a variety of motives that actually inspire the Americans to do what they did. I'll leave it up to you to cast judgment on that and kind of look at what you think was good and bad. And was this just a land grab? Was it a way to get our more markets over in Asia? Were we just trying to help the Filipino people? Did we really have compassion for them and hope that we could bring some good things to their culture, or was this really just imperialism? Were we trying to, definitely one of the things we said was we were trying to avoid the Philippines being taken over by other nations in the area, as we said about other nations too. This clearly is way beyond the Monroe Doctrine, right? This is on the other side of the world. So what are we trying to accomplish here? And I think if you look in history, and people have written books on this, you're going to see a variety of answers to that question. Just so you know, they're going to engage in guerrilla war with us, as it's pretty clear they're not going to get their independence. This is probably one of the biggest ranges of casualties I've ever heard, but they said that between 34 and 220,000 Filipinos died in this exchange with us. They engage in guerrilla war, which is the idea that a force that is outmatched in terms of numbers has to do kind of hit and run tactics on you. So they'll attack you, then run away so you can't find them. Wait a couple days, couple weeks, whatever the situation may be, attack again, go and hide. And so it's kind of this thing that you can annoy and create a lot of stress for a larger army, even though you're a smaller army. And remember, the Americans being in the Philippines, they don't know the area like the Filipinos do, so they're setting traps, they're doing these things. And we clearly are not going to commit all of our troops over there for a full-scale war in Asia. You know, we do that, you know, about 65 years later or so, right around there in Vietnam, and we paid the price for that. But this is an early indication. I think I said in the last video, kind of a foreshadowing of what we might have wanted to have paid attention to, because they make our life pretty miserable here. And the crazy thing about this is there are movements and discussions about giving the Filipinos their independence, especially around 1919 as World War I ends, and the self-determination of people around the world. And it's determined that they're not ready for that yet, right? And some of those things. It's not until 1946 that the Filipinos get their independence. Quite a checkered history there with us. And one of those things that we don't talk about a lot or isn't mentioned a lot. So I think as far as your essay goes, this idea of us engaged nationalism and imperialism is hand in hand there with what we see with the Philippines, okay? And remember, it's part of the Spanish-American War. Now, what I'd like to do is I want to show you some cartoons, political cartoons that came out during this time that talk about our involvement in the Philippines. There's also another activity I've done with students in the past to look at the atrocities that soldiers committed, because we do have one of the first times here where we see American soldiers commit atrocities against Filipino, in some cases civilians. They in turn also attacked American soldiers and did some pretty bad things. Again, a foreshadowing of what we might see with the My Lai massacre years later. All right, so I'm just going to share my screen, and we're going to go here. We're going to go to the political cartoons that I want to show you. We'll go to the beginning, and this is the first one. So a couple of the magazines here that we're dealing with basically had, just like the yellow journalists, they had certain slants and certain opinions on things, okay? So just like we see with our news agencies today, we see CNN more of a liberal view, and Fox News more of a conservative view. But magazines like Judge and Puck, okay, so right now you're looking at this and you're seeing that this would be Judge, supported expansion, supported imperialism, okay? So you notice here that Uncle Sam represents the Americans climbing the mountain. Ahead of him in the red coattails is a British individual. And above them in baskets are the people, the colonies, the civilizations that we're engaging at this time. Notice it says Cuba, Hawaii, okay? The individual with the hammer is indicative of the Philippines. And notice what's on the rocks as you're climbing. You're seeing all these different things that we're trying to carry them over. We're trying to move them from barbarism, oppression, superstition, brutality, beyond slavery, cannibalism, vice, and towards civilization, okay? So we are carrying them, the burden's on us, and we are doing what's best for them. Up in the British basket, you see India, China, okay, some of these countries that they were colonizing at the time and involved with. This is a very pro thing. We are helping them, right? Now, as you move to this one, notice who has the burden. It's the colonies, right? And so you see Uncle Sam, you see the German Kaiser, you see Britain, and it says the white man's burden, okay? And we are saying it's our burden to civilize them, but in reality, who has the burden here? And that is Life magazine, that did not support expansion, okay? So there you see a different view on our policy at this time. This is Judge. So again, this is going to be pro expansion. You see that we started at the beginning of our nation as just a little baby. As we moved through, we started to grow and grow and grow. And what's interesting is by the time you get to 1899, 1900, we are fat, right? We are, and yeah, you know, you would look at this and you'd say, because we look at obesity as kind of a negative thing, but this is actually communicating a positive way, positive view. A lesson for anti-expansionists, showing how Uncle Sam has been an expansionist first, last, and all the time. We've always done this. Why is everybody getting upset? We've always been an expansionist at the beginning of our nation. Look how many states that we've grown over the years. Of course, if you were to ever take philosophy with me, the underlying principle here is just we've always done it this way, therefore it's right. Right? Tradition equals right. Well, you know, we would challenge that. And then you see all the hands that are holding out their hands: France, England, you know, Italy, Germany, Russia. Okay, it's a bit unclear in terms, you know, if you just look at it. But if you look at the saying down on the bottom, it says, "And now all the nations are anxious to be on friendly terms with Uncle Sam." So not only does our expansion enhance us and make us larger, it makes us peaceful with the rest of the world. That's a pretty bold statement, right? Usually we're going to find out that that actually brings us into war with other nations. Here again, you see life. This is anti-expansion. So you see, you know, you see some laughter going on there. You see Roosevelt and McKinley, and you see that the Declaration of Independence, under it, notice what it says. It says, we bought the Filipinos for $20 million, $20 million. And therefore, we hold these lies to be self-evident that all, trying to read it there, were created unequal, okay, or all, whatever it says there. So this idea that it says fun for the boys, and we're just laughing as we're taking expansion. We're talking about that not everybody is equal. We're rewriting the Declaration of Independence because it applied to us and it clearly doesn't apply to the nations that we're getting involved with. Notice they perplexed George Washington in the background, clearly not laughing and enjoying what he's seeing. So again, another anti-view of imperialism. So as you're looking at these, ask yourself, what are the two major schools of thought here concerning expansion? Okay, Judge again, which is supporting expansion. All right, there's President McKinley. And as crazy as this sounds, this is a pro-expansion. It says the Filipinos first bath. Notice that it's civilization, and you are washing the Filipinos in civilization, okay? Which means that the Filipino is being cleansed and purified by the United States of America. It's good that we're there. Notice in the background, you see them putting on American clothes. They're very happy. And it's hard for us to imagine that McKinley, oh, you dirty boy, that was not quite, maybe a little sarcastic. And it may have been, it doesn't mean just because they were pro-expansion that they believed everything. There's a little bit of a, self-righteousness there. But the big message takeaway is that we are bringing civilization to the Filipinos, which was arguments that was made throughout the time. Life magazine, again, a negative. That's a British individual, indicative of that. A red letter day. The stranger, how long have you been civilized? The native, ever since my home was burned to the ground and my wife and children shot. So this is how some countries brought civilization to the colony or the peoples that they were trying to reach, according to this cartoon. Yes, here, we're going to bring you civilization. The way we're going to do it, we're going to shoot you. We're going to burn your house down. We're going to do things like that. Again, a foreshadowing of what happens in Vietnam. We were destroying South Vietnam to save Vietnam. That's going to be a big statement that's going to resonate as being, creating quite a bit of tension in terms of our policy years later. But you see versions of this early on here. And then finally, this is Puck magazine, again, supporting expansion. Beautiful woman, Columbia. Okay, she was prior to Uncle Sam in terms of, illustrating a symbol for the United States. She's putting on a beautiful bonnet, okay, Easter bonnet. And the bonnet is a world power. It's expansion. You want to be a world power. You want the very best and beautiful of our nation to get better. The only way to do that historically and now is through expansion. And so this is a beautiful kind of cartoon that is being used to kind of expand the arguments for increasing our empire. Now, clearly, as you look at this, you see that we would today look at this and just say it's probably completely sarcastic. Not so during the time, but there was a good deal of things that people believed at this time that were quite a bit different than ours, than what we believe today. So there's, let me just see if there's any more. Oh yeah, there's more cartoons. Okay, so Colombia is by no means enthusiastic by this transaction. Again, $20 million being offered to Colombia. We'll talk more about this, but this is in light of the Panama Canal. We did a little bit of manipulation there, and it's great that we're offering people money. It doesn't mean that they're happy about that. Okay, and actually, if you look at, there may be a dual meaning here. Actually, I'm sorry. This is the Philippines being offered $20 million. Colombia is in the background. That's the woman that you saw with the beautiful Easter bonnet, is now a little bit more conservative looking, is unhappy with the exchange. Okay. I said Colombia because that's going to be, you're going to see with the Panama Canal that's going to happen as well. So we've got two different uses of Colombia here, one positive and one less than positive in terms of this interaction. This is one of the ones that I think is the most interesting. It's Puck magazine. Now, Puck traditionally, okay, supported expansion. You look at this and you see that the children in the back are reading history, okay, all the different nation states that we got from other places. You see the taskmaster, the teacher, is Uncle Sam. You see a Native American in the background who looks like they're reading a book upside down. Okay. You see a Chinese student looking in, who's not yet in there yet, because if you remember, there was an open door policy in China, and that may actually be indicative of an open door, right? Teaching that. And you see in the back, if we can read that, it says England was governed her colonies whether they consented or not. By not writing for their consent, she has greatly advanced the world civilization. U.S. must govern its new territories with or without their consent until they can govern themselves. So clearly some are ready for governing and some are not. The states that have been made part of the Union in the back of the room, you see, have been made ready. Clearly China's not, because they're not even in the room yet. And the Native Americans, which is interesting, is not there either, as well as Philippines, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, and Cuba. The African American, I believe, over here is cleaning the windows, which is a little message there as well. But Uncle Sam to his new class, civilization. Now, children, you've got to learn these lessons whether you want it or not. But just take a look at the class ahead of you and remember that in a little while, you will feel glad to be here as they are. So the students in the back of the room used to feel like you, and now look at, they're all well dressed and happy and reading, and everybody's happy, right? Even the African American in the back of the room, they have a big smile on his face, and maybe he's working and cleaning and of his own free will. But this is a lot can be said in this cartoon to look at it that way. So this is, again, supposed to be a positive argument. You have to go through this. It's the white man's burden. We're doing what's best for you. First Filipino, what's the matter? Second Filipino, been taking another of those blamed lessons in the progress of civilization. So very much like the previous one, this is how we get civilized. We get blown up, we get injured, we get attacked, we get, murdered. So again, another visual of this. Then we see Judge magazine. Okay, again, a pro-expansionist. We've got a bayonet and it says liberty and civilization. says he wouldn't take it any other way. Again, we would, if this were published today in the newspaper, we would look at this as sarcastic and negative and against the United States. Here, this was being used to listen, we didn't want to do it with a bayonet, but this is the only way that they would accept what was in their best interest. Of course, in our best interest too, right? But we had to do this. You know, the uncivilized only understand one thing, according to American ideology at this time. Okay, kind of. And then we see the Philippine Islands. Okay, the World magazine, which is like Life, did not support expansion. Civilization begins at home. I want you to look at this one. 1898, so Spanish American War. Here's McKinley looking at his vast empire that he could you know, get his hands on. Here's Colombia. She's got a sword here, justice. And you have African Americans being lynched. You have African Americans dead all over the ground here. A reminder of slavery, the Jim Crow era, and some of the nasty things that were going on in the American South at this time. So you want to civilize everybody else. Why don't you act in a civil manner here to your own people? And here's Judge again being positive, right? Here comes Uncle Sam with so many nice products here, right? Mowing machine, and education, religion, bridges, steel rails, running as fast as he can into the Philippines and over here to China. Look, China needs all this stuff, and here comes Uncle Sam to save the day. And after all, the Philippines are only the stepping stone to China. There's a real arrogance here, right? That this was actually used as arguments. People said, that's right, we need to use the Philippines as a stepping stone to get to China. So be it. And we again would look at this as a negative, kind of like, wow, this is an attack on Uncle Sam. But back then it showed you what the arguments were. And that ultimately China, and think about what's going on right now with COVID-19, the ongoing foreign policy issues with China and industrial policies and domestic policies. We are so intertwined with China, and 120 years ago, these were the arguments that we were making. They needed all these things, we bring them there. And look what happens in the 20th, 21st century. We outsource our jobs to China. We have constant travel back and forth. And we've got this major thing happening now in terms of our interactions with them. Started 120 years ago with the open door policy. And again, Life magazine, very negative. The harvest in the Philippines. So we're not harvesting products. We're not harvesting food. We're not harvesting, you know, new materials. We're harvesting a lot of dead bodies. So that's what Uncle Sam is doing. He's killing rows and scores of the Filipinos. Remember, it was like between 34 and 200,000 dead. Kind of a somber way to end the cartoons, but you see the different viewpoints concerning expansion and things like that. So that'll be a nice thing to include in your essay in terms of imperialism and nationalism. And again, it's not going to be till 1946 that it happens. And we're going to use the Philippines in World War II as a place to fight the Japanese. Okay, so and Japan's not happy with us during this time as we begin to get a foothold over in Asia through the Philippines. And it's not a stretch to say that, you know, them attacking us at Pearl Harbor in 1941, you have our involvement in the Russo-Japanese War, and then maybe our involvement over here in the Philippines is not endearing us to the Japanese, who are going to become a major world power that a lot of people didn't see coming. So I hope that today that makes sense, and just to help you with your essay, get those revisions into me if you can. Hope you're doing well. You're able to get outside. Trying to think if there's anything I've been doing that has been different. Just riding my bike and running and when I can, and watching some Netflix. Fargo, I'm watching that right now, and just looking at some different movies here and there, but hoping that we have our restrictions starting to lift a little bit, and that you can get out there and get some things done. I know some of you are working. I hope that's going well. Please protect yourself, stay safe. Some people have 2 jobs. Some of my players, so I miss a lot coaching them. But I know some of them are working, and that's good, making money and helping our business and things like that. So anyways, let me know if you need anything. Please email me. Be happy to get back to you, any questions that you would have. And I will see you virtually soon.